Hello, and welcome to the November edition of the Poetry Playhouse series. And Jules Nyquist and myself, John Roach, are hosting. And we're really eager to hear and talk to Lauren Camp. As many of you know, Lauren was recently appointed the New Mexico State Poet Laureate. She will be the second person to hold that position after the inaugural Poet Laureate, Levi Romero. And I think Lauren is a fitting choice, the most fitting choice for this position in many ways. She's not only a remarkably gifted and prolific writer with a keen sense of craftsmanship, but she also has a joy of poetry that she loves to pass along to students in classes and workshops. And we were talking earlier about her plans to take poetry out to the furthest corners of this big state. So that should be really terrific for the people in those communities. And I hope that we'll have a chance to talk to Lauren a little bit about her new role, as well as her writing in the conversation that will follow this reading and precede the open mic. Lauren Camp has authored 5 books, most recently Took House from Tupelo Press, as well as 100 Hungers, Turquoise Door, This Business of Wisdom, and The Dailiness. Her honors include the Dorset Prize and finalist citations for the Arab American Book Award and Housatonic Book Award. Her poems have appeared in many of the top journals, including Kenyon Review, Prairie Schooner, Poet Lore, Blackbird, Los Angeles Review, and so forth. She's been translated into 4 languages, and she's also been doing a lot of these really neat residencies at places like the Grand Canyon National Park, Denver Botanic Gardens, Black Earth Institute, the Mayo Clinic, and the Mabel Dodge House. Interestingly, Lauren Camp was featured in our last in-person open mic at the Cactus Brewery back in February 2020, just before everything shut down, and she and Nate Maxon read there to a packed audience, and I think few of us suspected what was about to ensue. Anyway, we're quite pleased to have Lauren Camp back in more hopeful times, hopefully, and look forward to her reading. Lauren.
Thank you so much. Those were the days when we could be free and read and be in community so safely. I'm so happy to be here with all of you, people I recognize and people I don't. And I'm excited to read some work that I have in book form and some newer work to you. So Jules asked me to hold up my book. So there's my most recent book. It's called Took House. And that is the book I'm going to read from. It came out during the pandemic. And I've done a lot of Zoom readings in the past couple of years from the book, but I thought I would start with one of the poems in the book that I have never read aloud to an audience, even a virtual audience. Fiction. Every Wednesday, he is mourner and bitter in time beneath pardon. Long glasses fill to the neck until the table is liquid. His voice is a hand cupping the ocean. He is shirking his love. He is loving his love. He says love to a wife, but it isn't love that has fallen into the glass. It's a mouth wearing a fiction, a mouth already dry. He sighs and says he'll be home on his white legs, but lands instead where he's willing to feather and wing each passage, where he swallows each way of pretending. So the book follows, it has three elements that sort of interweave or maybe pull apart. There's a main storyline, and then there are poems about raptors and high desert predators, and there are ekphrastic poems, poems about artists and artist processes. So this is one of the raptor poems. It's called, and it seems like a perfect day to read it because here, as they were saying in New Mexico, it was so windy. And so let me just take you right into it. It's called Sharp-Shinned Hawk. Days are barely at zero. Take wind shear as the palace, pleasure layer, depth. The bird raises its head from a chest soft with down. From above the land is scars sewn with narrow eyes. Steady, steady. It swerves and lurks in hackberry, soapberry, mesquite, as if one could ride a sun to luck. One does. Behold, between flaps and gliding, it nests inside some tighter aspen branches, eats first crickets as small delicacy before its centered eyes triangulate on songbirds, sparrow, thrush in gentle grass, bounty, bounty, bounty. I began this book in 2005 and it came out in 2020. That is a long time of marinating poems, revising and reforming, reshaping a whole manuscript. What I learned from that is that patience is worth it. And the other part of it that I learned is that patience is still hard, no matter how worth it it is. So this is one of the earlier poems that I wrote. The night clouds wrestled the sky. At that moment, I was blind to the sorrow and stop that was coming. For that gentle hour, I settled into the only split in the road where I still saw the purple reflection of day slipping from cedar and aspen. Air temperature as skin would shift to bare and brisk. But in the sky, unguarded orange shadows advanced and clouds extended to unkempt corners, the desert's chambers of gray. Trees unfurled their fluted, five-petaled, veined fingers, precision worth noting. What else should we look at but fugitive color, the shape that's not empty? So little of what happens belongs to us, only the frequent sense of being encircled. After light was stripped from the scarlet wall, a string of birds armed long branches, rhapsodizing. I had entered the chatter curved worship of their bursting, the song grafted to the moon's musky discipline. Once their noise was placed, it remained in my mind for years. Not a coincidence that I heard and saw a final stray sweep of sun as pigment and chord, and would summon it again next time I was swallowed, beat down. That night, the sky came up to my lips. It tasted of wind and gave me something to miss. Insomnia. Middle of each night, the man reads pages of hours and chapters while a gray moon slips to a triangle of pebbles. He hefts his wide novel from the previous repeat, leaves the ruffle of stretched sheets and slips to the couch, erasing the deep sense of sleep. His eyes feel absurd, flensed of matter in heavy-lidded surrender. On it goes. Discard all minutes, watch shapes shade the wall and a yellow haze from the overheads. Exhaustion relaxes in messy piles and the cat melts to her malaise, back of the sofa with that dark, drooping curtain of fur. Hours are dying in the half-carcassed night. Through a fog of exhaustion, the man takes a protean range of elixirs and tinctures, and what is held finally eases, erases. The thick sky and its edge, the maddening chartreuse of the clock. He snores, boiled or frozen by night, puts his back to the pink bloom of quick-starting sun. He'll get a few hours before day skims the window, before other bolts and holdings let loose, before the light is proportional, expanding, before the horizon flips up from the dark. I want to read one more poem from this book, and then I'm going to switch to some newer work. So there are poems about artists and artist processes, and actually art is sort of the way that I came into writing poetry, was as a visual artist. So I continue to be interested in exploring the artwork and the reasoning behind why an artist might choose to make a certain type of artwork. So this particular poem is inspired by Pete Mondrian, called Composition Number 2, the particular artwork I'm looking at, which is from 1920. And you probably know Mondrian's work. It's the boxy work with the white, red, blue, black, the thick lines, very geometric. The poem is called Inward, Downward, White, Gray, Black. The box in the middle opens a door to the pond in his backyard, where no one ever quarrels. The sun elbows the red fence with loose gatepost in the back alley, and tender cold air from the side yard comes to meet the sweet and endless blooms. Okay, so that's from Took House. I want to read to you from a new book, but before I do, I got a request, and I think poetry requests are kind of interesting. So I got a request to read a poem that just came out in a publication, and so I thought I would do that for you. The poem is called Still Life, Dark as a Fig. 2 months of meat and grain, and only one thing happens at a time. Only time happens. We drink wine and tea and unbecome. We go to sleep. My love sleeps, hatching sounds from upper and lower surfaces of his throat. Awake, I keep collecting the verses. I get up. I lie on the couch. The scenery is a substance, alone, fixed. The whiskey shot is irascible, a long roaring boat and a whole gesture. It swishes through me. I let the cat sit on my bones. I'm safe on earth. And before long, it is still night. I see more of it at the window. I am half in, half out of a trance. I ask my dead father to come down from his dance party with my heavenly mother and take me any place he wants. Coyotes gossip in the pocket of our property, their tongues through the blue-purple night. I ask for this bit of nothing. Still, life, dark as a fig. The dark flops further onto me, an equivalent geometry of every direction. The dark knows it will last for years, even though the iron day starts. That is the last poem. It's not in a book. It's in a manuscript I continue to work on endlessly, but it is the last poem I wrote about sort of tracing the last couple of years of my father's life. Okay, so I have a new book coming out next year that I want to read to you from. The book is very much a love letter to New Mexico, even the difficult things about New Mexico, the wildfires and the drought. And so I thought I would take this opportunity with John and Jules and all of you to read some of these poems for the first time. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you're drawn to. Okay, this poem is called Lessons from a Temporary North. We left our house. The stucco cracks left cactus crown and spine, arms out of which flowers came like savages, left our spoons and the mounding music that sleeps us into anviled night. We had eaten dinner, a bowl of rice with yellow butter, and drove until only solid light wrote our way, the wind a snap between junkyard and mountain. We drove through red wings, crusty forests, past wood fences, and arrived where houses clasped to each other like shells. Our language after this day of transition was becoming a negotiation, a nectar, a table of day-old irises, the window of a bedroom. Outside, a white dog's rough tongue tasted evening. Ambition, the accumulation of comfort, leftover cake. Frida painted the succulent cut flesh of watermelons on her last canvas, sandias. 3 years later, Diego, God-warned to his edge and fluid filling his lungs, painted the same earthly fruit. There are no casual insights. We dared to search out the seedy lean of the sun, looking both ways to its softening. Within semicircles of earth, we found comfrey, horsetail, and plume. We found calm and lull, another contrition. Fields with no meaning but wildness. The windows of the cabin held inside and outside, two particular spaces. Okay, the next poem is called Dear Desire. I don't know how I built this need, where to hold it. I cannot explain why the wind inhabits my body, and I would like to see more gold leaf. I would like everyone to see it. Last night, we watched another movie in which love is a threshold and the city around it, deep snow. What I mean is, I'm lucky. I post magnets on my fridge, small print stuck on a Housatonic grocery list, tinfoil, cauliflower, salsa, a whole journey of feeding my family. Those clutching reminders with devotional practice. Mornings, my husband grinds the coffee with pro-grade earmuffs on. He wears a blue shirt again, another day dressing in distance. He watches me linger beside the sayings, something to use between the world and my will. What do we know of contentment? My husband is exhausted by the unavailable trouble I crave. My magnets tell me to expect nothing, to never stop wanting. They repeat every day. After this, he sorts the laundry, darks, lights, blues. These are the rooms of our house. The next poem, I think very often that I write not about place, but into place. Like it's like I use a place to get me to an emotion, to a memory, to an experience, to something I want to either hold on to or explore and let go of. And place is my way in. It's my grounding. So I think it shows up in a lot of the poems, but it really shows up in this one. It's called The Net Signal Reaches the Body in a Factor of 2. I count 32 robins in the dead tree at the curve of our road. You count days since rain. Every moment we assess the end of things, the knives we need to tender the meat for dinner. Before I leave, I put my face to the mirror, realize the long bones of heaviness and the bitter things I've forgotten. On the drive to work at a small corner off the interstate in an echo of sky, thirsty, wheeling along on small excursions, there are racks of army fatigues. Many people shop, sunglasses, their backs to our town. How to explain who we are? The orbit of heartache, and I keep following directions to the shadow of cottonwoods. All the hope in this gold will erase. I don't lose sleep because it is winter and the night is already full of its letdown. The weather coasting through, rain plucking the ground, or the little shapes of dry air edged with olive trees. I hold nights in the little spot at my hip. I hold days by the wrists, rest hours for loving what doesn't exist. Next time I drive to town, I see the top of the mountain is missing, dusted with gray like a grief. Pinholes of light in a flat morning sky. Is it still a mountain if it is locked behind itself? I see my world in verbs and say it mistaken, hurried, and with ongoing action. Say it as origin and corners. My love returns from a cardiology appointment where he's taken his compass of anger and each consequence we can't determine. They've heard his heart beat a pace that is 4 times the normal. And so now I put my ear to his chest like a button. I am sewn there, listening, holding on. I have 2 more poems. This one is also very New Mexican. Walking. A guy with a cane and a hoodie looks down on the freeway, fettles the shape of his backpack with his free hand, wipes down his eyes. He must continue writing his tired body on distance. In this hour, nothing but travel. This evening, nothing but moon. From the moon, the red of his neck. It is nearly Easter. People walk, heads down in the wall of long wind toward the old santuario, toward the paradox of walking without crutches or pain, toward our uncontained clouds. They push through the eye of all doubt. And if they mumble, it is the edifice of language, how to withstand. An intention is set, creased with the patterns of desert. That I see a guy at the overpass outside my village means winter's small sphere is mending, means every green impulse, every desperate sense, every desperate step makes sense. Pilgrims don't wander into panorama, but seek a place to be healed. Wind laps at a road gone loose. There is something lonely in the near and far sky. Does he see it? So many travelers crippled with grief pressed to the shoulders of freeway, putting faith in the picture of particular flesh and particular gesture, intonations of bone. Take the blood of despair from their parched lips. Take their exhaustion, the density of sorrow, the lack, the imperfect body with its bristle and promise. Take the sun-kilned waiting, each bandage and handicap. Give them luck from the shadows, some reparation. Before I read the last poem, thank you so much to John and Jules, especially for the invitation to come and read for the Playhouse. And thank you to everyone who's here. The people that I recognize, I just want to call out certain people's names, and I see you all, and the people I know, I'm so happy to see you. So I'm going to read one last poem, and it is the poem that gives this new book its title. It's the very last line of the poem. The poem is called Stay Into. Not the absence of sky, but the sudden work of life. Lance or ash, shovel, notch or wince. I begin inside myself to sing a prayer for nourishment, a feat of the spirits I was taught one summer at a wooden table, a knot of bread, the euphony of childhood I memorized, those unwrapped syllables, rolling immersion over years. The words have gone. I take to rhapsodic humming. It was never bounty, but simplicity, a time spun to habit, ordinary inclination, a sort of fantasy. God, I adored that childhood, those colors I made from my breathing, even the dimly, the stubborn farthest pitches. All this time I've kept on the lip that ancient song map, the divine, worn smooth between devourings. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you. And maybe we could have a round of applause if people want to unmute. Yeah.
Yay!
Bravo!
Bravo! Bravo! Beautiful word.
Yes.
Well, it's
Wonderful.
always a delight and always a surprise, because I think no two Lauren Camp readings are the same, and that's a good thing. Especially we're especially honored that you chose to share some selections from your forthcoming book, from your New Mexico book. So thank you. I was struck by what you said about not writing about things, but writing into them. So not writing about place, but writing your way into the place with all that brings. And I'd been thinking about that before, because you write concerning nature, concerning history, concerning family history, concerning the small facts of a day in the life, all of those things and more, but you're not limited by any of those things. And I think that phrase, writing into instead of writing about, is key to what's going on there with your method. And I wonder if you could just expand on that a little bit. I think language has something to do, obviously has something to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I know writing into place is very abstract, but place is like the one constant with whatever the material I'm working with. Like I can task myself with settling into a place, and the place is very often New Mexico or my little village, my little farming village, but it might be somewhere else. And that's part of why I pick up and go other places, is so that I have a different place to write into. But I might be writing about any of those same things that you just listed, about family history or about, anything, a moment in a day, something that I saw that I can't forget, but it's place that settles me to doing it somehow. And when I write about New Mexico, which I do an awful lot, I'm having to write about the same things over and over, because they exist around me, the sun and, the dryness, the cactus, the whatever I'm describing, the landscape. And so that's interesting in itself, because it means I have to find, this is my own rule for myself, I have to find a new way to say it.
Yeah. And it seems to me that it's the opposite of abstraction, that you're writing into something as a way of getting beneath the the generalizations that we tend to perceive the world when we're half perceiving it, and you're getting, grounding into it in a very specific way.
Yeah, it is truly and literally grounding to have to describe the place.
Yeah, that would be a good workshop. Yeah, so yeah.
I would add too, Lauren, and you mentioned you were a visual artist before you, well, I don't know, I'm assuming you might have written poetry when you were a visual artist, or talk more about that transition. It seems like it's more of a harsh like you were doing art, now you're doing poetry, or was it mixed together? Was art kind of more like the place, or how did you get into that?
Yeah, I started, I was a writer. I was a freelance writer and a magazine editor for a number of years before I began making visual art. I was honestly, a kind of mediocre prose writer. I could do it. It was fine. It was not interesting, like overly interesting to me to take language and make it spectacular. I just needed it to work. If I were writing press releases for the American Red Cross, they just had to be functional. They weren't like, I could go to my boss, and I often did, and say, can I do this creative thing? And he would say, nope, like follow the rules, which is honestly why I don't do that anymore, because the rules just didn't work for me. But I moved from that into making visual art. My medium was fabric and thread. And I think, so somewhere along the way, I began to mix poetry into the artwork, like into the titles, into the actual work. And then at some point, I kind of made a sharp transition into poetry, which when I look at my poems, they hold all the things I learned as a visual artist, the color and texture and pattern and negative space and the composition. All of that's in there for me. I can write more poems than I could make art. I could pretty much make 2 pieces a year. And so I'm very glad that I get to express more in a different way, but that it holds the visual art and the radio work that I've done, the sound work that I've done, both in there. So yeah, poetry is now my solo container for all of it.
And
Yes, thank you for
the work is
mentioning
so visual. It really, yeah.
Mhm,
It is,
mhm. So
I'm sorry, Jules.
I was just saying, and thank you for reminding us of the sound too. That was really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Um,
I wonder if you wanted to talk a couple of minutes about your goals as the Poet Laureate of the great state of New Mexico.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. My main goal currently is to have enough stamina to do everything that I'm trying to do. But my intention, aside from going to schools and libraries and just presenting poetry at those venues, is to go to the organizations and communities that aren't used to having poetry in them. The arts, sciences, humanities, organizations, people doing good work in any of those around the state, and trying to push poetry into some of the little spaces that they might have open to widen the audience, both for poetry and for their work. So that's one element. And the other, so if anyone here connected to New Mexico has ideas, please let me know. And the other part is to get out to, as we were talking before this started, to all the rural communities in one way or another with poetry. And there are a lot of rural parts of New Mexico. So I've been in conversations with a number of people through the state library, and the Department of Cultural Affairs run the Poet Laureate program for the state. And so we've been talking about ways to reach some of those communities and starting to have some really intriguing different ways to do that, which is very exciting to me.
And I did want to mention, it's in the chat, but Jules might want to repeat it. There's your Zoom reading tomorrow, and then you have a Teatro Paraguas reading, a live in-person reading up in Santa Fe. I forget when that is. And so
it's December 4th, and I'm putting that in the chat also. So that's an in-person.
and I think we also had, Jules, I think also put the, or you put the Poet Laureate website in the chat. So folks can check that. And again, you can save the chat with the 3 little dots, save it to your desktop or whatever, and get that information. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
And
So-
Lauren has books. Do you
Yeah.
still have signed copies of your books through your website,
I
laurenkenyon.com? Or
do.
okay.
Yeah.
I do. And I also have, if you put, I think you put my website somewhere up there. I also have links to the publishers. If someone wants a book and doesn't want it signed, buy directly from the publisher. That's really cool.
Good.
Right.
I was wondering if we could open it up to some questions or comments from the audience, if that's okay.
And you can unmute yourself to ask something if you want, or
Yeah.
you can put it in the chat. So
So I guess Marguerite has a question.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Jules. This is wonderful. Lauren, hello.
I'm there.
I'm really struck by how active your poems are. There's a lot of action, like forward action. And I'm just curious if that is a conscious process for you. Like if you're thinking about, I wouldn't say they always have story, but there's always this forward, do you know what I mean by forward action? It's building in sometimes it does feel like stories, and sometimes it's a feeling. But I'm wondering if that's conscious for you, if that's something you'd worked on consciously, or if that's just a natural kind of way your mind works in your poetry forms.
That's a great question. I don't know. I have never thought about it that way before, Marguerite, but I would say that I'm consciously thinking about a kind of energy in the poems. Does that sort of match to what you're talking about as forward action? I think about that, like having the poem have some kind of energy. I also really like I like complicating poems. And then having to figure out how to make it connect to an audience, whether that audience is one person or several. So that complication keeps it interesting for me. It forces me to do more than I think the poem can do when I first start it. And then I've got to figure out both how to have likely some narrative to it, but also not a straight narrative. So that narrative, that complication, and that energy I think I'm looking for all of those.
Yeah,
Well, it
great
works beautifully.
Great. Do we have another question?
I have a question for Lauren, and thanks for this reading. It's good to see you here. I last heard you read, I don't know, a year or two ago on Zoom, and we had some email conversations. We have to get back to that in due course, or Facebook Messenger or whatever. But I was very interested in what you were saying about writing into place as contrasted with what I regard as a slightly different concept or process that has different consequences, which is writing about place, which seems to be a more stand off or stand away from, holding a location at a distance. And it seems to me that writing into place has a lot more engagement with and in. And to borrow that title, I love your new title. It reminds me of Forrest Gander's title, Be With. And in a way I feel like you are being with your surrounds in your writing, and there's a lot of action, a lot of movement in your work. So if you can comment on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's not that writing into place is just something that I realize I do. I was going to say I'm embodying the place, but that doesn't really make sense. I'm actively connecting with the place. And I'm not, it isn't that standoff. I want to walk the place. I want to name the place. I want to name the things that are growing in the place. I want to feel the quality of the air or the dirt or the whatever. So it's an active, like physical, pore level noticing of a place. And that's something that I didn't get to do in art. Well, that's very poetry specific. If I'm going to be in a place, I'm going to pay attention around me. I'm gonna try. And I'm not doing it. I'm not even doing it very consciously. I'm just doing it.
That's great. Thanks. Yeah. It's
Along with
apparent in your work,
Hello,
Yeah.
I have something to say. And
Go
that
Go
is,
ahead, Kate. Hi, Kate.
hi. I just want to say that your voice is so strong, but gentle. And I feel that every presentation that you will make, you will invite people like myself with a very loud voice all the time, really deep, singing along, that you will invite people to their strength of gentleness. And it is just you sing your talk. So I will listen to you more often, and I may be able to be re-invited back to the choir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful comment. Thank you.
And Kate, you're always welcome. Yeah. Yeah. I was just had thought for a second, there was a line you had about the travelers not looking at the panorama, but being engaged in the. Do we have another question? Having trouble switching through.
I'd like to know when the new book will appear. When's it coming?
So actually by some stroke of luck and amazing timing, I have 2 books coming out next year. Yeah, this book is coming out in September of 2023. So, and it's a book I think that I started working on in maybe 2013. I write a lot and I take a long time to actually complete a further body of work. But so I have a lot of things going at any time. But yeah,
We
it'll
have
be
several projects always going on different burners. Yeah.
I seem to, yeah. It's part of that not being willing to follow the rules, even the rules that I set for myself.
It works.
Are any of the new poems on your website?
I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
And Lauren, what about the second book? You said that you had 2 new books.
Yeah, so the second book comes out it's out in June, and it's really quite different. It sort of follows the artist Agnes Martin as a muse, and in part just considering her spacious canvases at a time. I began it in 2017, right after Donald Trump was elected, and I was trying to figure out the world both far outside of myself, and also my father was dipping into dementia rather quickly. And so I was also looking at the world that was very, very close to me. And those spacious canvases were incredibly helpful in navigating what seemed too chaotic to me. So that's the other book.
Well, we look forward to that. And I'm going to end the recording unless you had anything else, John. So
I think we should probably move on to the open mic, but we very much enjoyed this and look forward to the new books, and great to have a preview. So one more round of applause if we could for Lauren Camp.
Thank you all so much.
Beauty.
Thank you.
Beauty.